And Mohammed, you're live. How are you doing, sir?
How are you doing, Derek?
Doing good,
fine.
good. You called in last week, didn't you?
Yes, I called him last week. I was a little disappointed with how it unfolded.
Yeah, I was looking back at last week's episode, and I saw that a lot of the arguments were voices raised, and they were, how dare you, instead of whether or not something is true, it was, how dare you have the gall to say a thing. And I don't think that gets us to reality. I don't think that gets us to truth. If we can stay off of that, I would love to continue this conversation.
Yes, I'll try my best. Thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
Yes?
So, what would you like to talk about today?
Yes, I called in to speak a little bit about what is known today as the Kalam cosmological argument.
Okay.
That is put forth by, it is the proponent of this argument, as it is known today, is William Lane Craig, as most of you will know, of course.
Sure. So let's, before we get started, I'd like to say that the cosmological argument dates back before William Lane Craig, but this version that you're about to give is via William Lane Craig. You can follow the Kalam, or not the Kalam, you can find the cosmological argument dating all the way back to Descartes, I believe. I'll get corrected in the comments, we'll see. But how about you give us the premises, and we will pick up from there.
Yes.
So what is premise one?
Yes, excellent. The first premise is that the universe began to exist.
Okay.
And then the second premise is that everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Okay.
And then the conclusion is the universe has a cause.
Okay, so let's break this down by premise, yeah? So
yes,
premise one. Premise one is
the
that
universe began to exist.
The universe began to exist. So how can we determine that the universe had a beginning?
Actually, Eric, I was going to speak about why it is a false argument.
Oh.
It is an unnecessary argument.
Well, let's break it down just a little bit, though, because not everybody's heard the Kalam cosmological argument. So the first premise is that the universe began to exist, right?
Yes.
And, I mean, it seems to make sense because, well, to the best of our knowledge, there was a beginning with a Big Bang, but that doesn't mean that we know that for a fact, right? So I would say that
is absolutely true.
Right. So I would say that my best response would be, I don't know, but to the best that I've heard from people who I would regard as experts, right, which would be the preponderance of scientific evidence is that we can reverse the redshift that we see in the expansion of the universe to go back to what has been labeled the Big Bang, right? I don't know if there was a before, if there could be a before. It was actually explained to me by Matt that even asking if there was a before, that makes zero sense at all. So we'll go from there. So, okay, so number one.
Yes, but Eric, I think the problem, how I look at it, is that the way we define universe is very problematic.
Okay.
Yes, the way we define universe is the source of the confusion, I believe.
Okay.
Because in the way we used to define it, and we still define it, is the sum of particulars we see around us. The observed universe is the sum of those particulars we observe. However, in today's the widely accepted definition today is the totality of space, time, and matter. So these are two very different definitions.
Right.
If you look at it as if you take it if you take the widely accepted definition today, it should, you can't say the universe began to exist in a sense, because you're not speaking about something particular. You see my point?
Not quite. I mean, I guess I would push back on what's observed as well, because if we were to observe more of the universe, I wouldn't then qualify that as the universe. I would say that we don't have a full understanding of what the universe is, how large it is, or what all of its, physical properties are. But we would identify all that is, everything that exists, as the universe.
Yes. The beginning to exist also has to be defined correctly also. And if you say the universe began to exist, but what do you mean by this word? Most scientists, they will say that they mean by the universe beginning to exist that space, time, and matter, there was like a point in the past after which space and time and matter emerged, as far as I know. However, I don't think I need to go into this at all.
Well,
okay? What I believe.
So the reason why I wanted to break this down a piece at a time is because one of the things that we try to do on Talk Heathen is not skip past the premises so that people who have never heard of it can have an understanding of what the hell we're talking about, right?
Yes, yes. So what do you mean by beginning to exist? Is that the... Hello?
I'm listening. Hello?
What do we mean by beginning to exist? You mean, Eric?
Yep.
Yes. Beginning to exist, when we look at things beginning to exist, when we claim that a thing begins to exist, we are claiming that a thing begins to exist after its non-existence. A thing does not exist, and then it begins to exist.
Can you give me an example of something that did not exist at all and then began to exist? What is your example?
I claim that everything in the world is like this. Everything in the world is like this.
Okay, is this a semantic argument, or is this are you saying that matter...
No, it's an actual argument.
Okay,
it's
so what...
actual argument.
Okay, so give me an example of a thing that begins to exist. I believe it's ex nihilo, or ex nihilo. What is an example of something that begins to exist out of nothing?
Yes, Eric?
Yes.
Ex nihilo simply means that a thing is created out of nothing.
Right.
However...
Give me an example of that.
That is what it means.
Okay, before we move forward, I need you to give me an example.
Any example of this.
Okay, so why do you believe it?
We have examples. Yes, I don't believe in creation ex nihilo. I believe in creation of one thing out of another, in the sense that one thing begins to exist after it is totally non-existent, out of something else that ceases to exist. You see the point? You see the difference?
It feels like a semantic argument. I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt here, Mohammed. And by the benefit of the doubt, what I'm going to say is that what I think you're saying, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that out of existing matter, right, things rearrange. Yes. And once those things rearrange enough, we redefine them as something else. And once we put a definition on that thing, we can say that thing began to exist. Is that where, can we agree on your definition that way?
Not really, because I accept that things do rearrange. However, I do not accept that things are only rearranged. Things are also subject to perish into other things. A thing ceases to exist and something else begins to exist. This is what I'm saying. So there is a constant creation. When you die, when you are born out of you begin to exist out of the fluid. I claim this.
Okay,
I know there are some people who don't believe in this.
That's
when you die, you perish into the earth, and then I believe in the resurrection. We will be created out of the earth again.
Depending. But I think I get your point. I mean, me personally, I wanted to get burned alive and shot out of a cannon, but now I think that if I die, I think getting preserved and then get wheeled out of the ACA like Jeremy Bentham every year could be pretty fun. But either way. So I really do think this is a semantic argument. Where are you going with this? Because I know you are not you're not an atheist, right? So what point are you trying to make?
Yes, the point I'm trying to make is that there ultimately must be something eternal.
Why?
See, Eric, why? Because there must be something existing in and of itself. There must be something necessary.
Why?
Because a thing, why is that? Because if a thing is not eternal, it will not be existing in and of itself.
Okay, you
It
defined a thing into
Yeah.
existence by definition, by saying a thing has to exist because it has to exist. So if we're doing this on paper, what you've done is you've provided a framework where you're saying a thing has to exist, therefore it has to exist. It's not really getting us anywhere. You need to demonstrate that something has to exist.
Not really, Eric. I'm saying that the thing begins to exist, and therefore it must be brought into existence by a thing that has no beginning. There is a difference.
Why?
I'm not just saying that things exist, therefore things exist.
So are you saying
coming into existence?
Where does this eternal thing even enter into it? I mean, if you're talking about the birth of a human being, where does a infinite being come into it, right? I'm pretty sure that, when mommies and daddies get together and have sex, that it's a natural process where no infinite being is needed.
I understand that there are causes within the world, but however, the difference is, Eric, that when I observe things, I'm observing particular things. This is, I think, the difference. I'm observing a particular human being, a particular tree, a particular earth, sun, like that. So what I would say is that the human being is a particular who was born out of conditions, out of natural causes, which are the parents.
Right.
It was born by those parents.
Okay.
However, it was not created by those parents, because the fact that this human being began to exist is not, the fact it's coming into existence cannot be explained by another thing before it which came into existence. Otherwise, we would have an infinite regress of creators.
Which is why your argument makes no sense. So what you're doing is you're creating an infinite regress because what you're saying is a prior condition needs to be met before this condition and that. And so what we could say theoretically is, I was born of my parents who were born of their parents who go all the way back to the beginning of the earth, that can go back to the beginning of existence. And then what does that go back from? And so what you do is, and I've seen this argument, and that's this infinite regress. And so the only way to get out of it, according to Descartes,
I
believe.
You totally.
Right?
Eric,
okay, hold on. Let me finish this. That way people can kind of see this fully played out, right? So according to Descartes, there's the having to go back to whatever can end this infinite regress, because if you say God created it, we could say, what created God? Well, God created himself. So there's in this definition a special pleading, right? It's called a special plea. And that the special plea is everything needs to have a beginning except for the special circumstances that I'm presenting that I can't provide any reason for. So is there anything in there that you disagree with? Because I really don't see why making special rules for a God makes that God more likely.
Eric,
yes.
I accept that things, I accept that the infinite regress of events, of conditions and events, is in some cases necessary, and in some cases it is possible. However, it is the infinite regress in creators and dependencies that is impossible. You see the difference? Basically, I believe, and this is what many Orthodox Muslims believe. They believe that God is an eternal creator who has always been creating things by his will and power.
Right.
That's the point.
Oh, no. I totally get that. What I'm saying is that, number one, until you can back that up with evidence, all you're left with is people blowing smoke up each other's asses. And that's nothing on you. What it is people saying, yeah, this is necessary. I totally agree this is necessary. All right, let's call that God. But until we can actually demonstrate that need, or until we can show that has happened, then the best way to move forward is to say, I don't know, and continue to explore. Because what I see as an epistemological difference between you and I here is that it sounds like you're saying you have the conclusion. And what I'm saying is the best thing for humanity to do is to keep learning and exploring, right? The more we learn, the more we explore, the more we grow, the more we will find out what that conclusion is. And who the fuck knows? It might be close to yours. But until we learn, it, we're not going to get there. And so what I think is the argument that it must be this God, what it does is it closes doors to exploration. I think that's very problematic.
I believe, Eric, we don't have to say that this God or that God. It says the God, the Creator. This is how I look at it. Even I believe that the Christians and the Jews, I believe in the same God as the Christians and the Jews. There are some differences there are major differences in other, but not in the concept that there is a Creator. But I think.
Okay,
Eric,
hold on, Mohammed.
There is.
I sorry, I know I'm jumping all over you here, but I really have to say that when people call in, I take them at their word. I'm listening to you, Mohammed, because your definition of a God is going to be different from other people who are calling in and their definitions of a God. And so you saying my God is just all of theirs, what it's doing is it's co-opting people who didn't agree to be co-opted by you. So in this argument,
I understand.
I'm talking to you.
But okay. Yes, I understand. But there is the God of Abraham. We believe in the God of Abraham as a being above the heavens. I think that is not something we should. We shouldn't argue about God. This is what I'm saying. We should argue about other things. We shouldn't even argue. We should try to see where the truth is. This is what I believe.
I agree, and I
say something that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Eric. I just want to clarify the difference between the infinite regress in creators and the infinite regress in conditions, and why the first is. It is impossible. It has to be impossible. But the second, it has to be necessary in some cases, and it has to be possible in some cases.
Okay, go ahead and explain that, and then I may need to listen to this over again in the next week to be able to get you on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. When we say the infinite regress of creators, we are assuming that there are created things. So this is something you have to understand. If you want to accept that there is a creator, you have to understand that there are creatures, there are created things.
Hold on.
Now, a created thing cannot create itself any more than be created by nothing. It must have something. It must have an external creator.
Well. I don't know. I feel like conditions could be such that something comes into existence without. So when you say creator, that carries a lot of baggage, right? That word carries with it a lot of implications, intelligence and meaning and all of that I think muddy the water. And I just want to put a pin in that so that we can agree that the word creation is one that I have trouble with, even if you don't mean it intentionally. Just saying that a thing begins to exist, we can agree with that. I mean, by definition, a thing can begin to exist out of other things, but I don't think anything, begins to exist out of nothing. And I also don't think that supposing that as a necessary thing is something that we can logically do without cutting out a whole lot of other crap.
Eric, when I say creator, I don't mean like it can't. We haven't even spoken about the attributes of this creator. So I understand this totally that people will differ about who this creator might differ about who this creator is. I understand, but I'm speaking about an eternal being, like an eternal object. This is what I'm saying, an object of worship.
Why? Why would that be necessary at all?
Why is that? Yeah,
because
and these are the three questions I asked. I intended to ask Matt those three questions before, but I formulated them incorrectly. I said them incorrectly, and I believe that was part of why there was a misunderstanding last time.
Yeah. Because the thing is what that does is now. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but if you're saying now we need to identify the characteristics of this creator character, What you've done is assumed that I've agreed with the premise that needs to exist in the first place, and you've not gotten me there.
I understand.
So why would I ever want to
understand.
follow you down a rabbit hole that I don't even think has any is not justifiable or meaningful?
But I think if I just ask, if I put these 3 questions down, and then maybe we can. I'm not expecting that we agree today, but maybe we can look into it later. But just let me explain those 3 questions, and then that will be it. I think.
Let's go through the first, and if we have time, we'll get to the second, and if we have time, we'll get to the third.
Okay.
And if we don't have time, I'll need to move to another caller, and we can pick up again. You've been very agreeable.
Okay. Like I said, why is the infinite universe of creators impossible? We are assuming that there are created things, of course. This is what we are assuming. I accept this as an observation. You don't. Or you might not accept it the way I do. However, we know the first point is that a created thing does not exist in and of itself. Okay? It requires something external.
No, I did not agree to that.
It cannot create itself. It cannot be created by nothing. How can it come into existence? If it were to come into existence,
again, we're talking about the definition of create, right?
Yes, create is to bring something into existence after its non-existence.
Yeah, intentionally or just cause.
It doesn't matter.
It does, because you're getting to a God, right? You're moving toward a God that does create things intentionally. So, I mean, am I wrong?
But I haven't explained why it must be eternal first, and why there must be an eternal creator. Then we can go into why it has intention, why it has knowledge.
Yeah, but what you're doing is you're burying a very important point that completely undoes the premise that you're setting up. I mean, so even if I grant you this premise and we were to move toward a deity that has characteristics, then I would go back and say what you're saying is not valid under the premises that we agreed to. So what's the point?
The reason we believe that God has knowledge is the reason we believe this creator has knowledge.
No, I don't agree that your God exists. How can I believe that your God has any knowledge if he doesn't even exist?
I understand, Eric.
So what's the point?
The point is, I want to explain to you. I want to explain why he must be eternal, and then we can go on to speak about the attributes of that being, because a being must have attributes. You see, but if we don't accept that he is a being, then of course we wouldn't find it necessary to speak about knowledge, power, or anything. But I'm saying that there is this being, and this is why. Is it clear?
I'm sorry?
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm saying that there is this being, and this is the reason why I believe there is this being. And then I can speak about the attributes like power. And obviously, a thing that brings creatures into existence must have power, because the act of bringing things into existence is power, and it requires power.
Where do you get this from, man?
You can't be powerless and do something.
Again, you're adding a human characteristic to a thing that we're just. I mean, what you're doing is you're anthropomorphizing something here. I mean, you're putting the cart before the horse. You're saying that has to exist. Therefore, I mean, don't get me wrong. You're making the exact same mistake that the originator of the argument that you say doesn't work, right? The cosmological argument. You're making the exact same mistake that he did, and that is it's a circular argument, right? It has this Cartesian argument that this has this Cartesian element that requires something that is unjustified before it can even move forward. Mohammed?
Yes, the reason I claim that God is unlike his creatures, and I do not anthropomorphize or like that. The reason I claim that God is unequaled by his creatures is because I believe God is eternal.
Yeah. And I am your God, right? And I am eternal.
I believe that he is eternal.
And according to the book of Eric, right, I created all things. These are all statements, and at least I have the honesty of saying that that's not true, right? I have the honesty of saying that I'm just a sarcastic jerk, The fact is you're just giving claims, man.
Let me put those 3 points, Eric. If I put those 3 points, it will be clear to you, I'm sure, inshallah. It will be clear to you. There are many things I can speak about. I listen many times to your shows, and I see that there are many points, I know the answer to them, but I'm not just, I don't believe, maybe it's part of the language difference and that.
I think so. I know that I was watching the chat last week, and there were people who were saying, well, Mohammed, he keeps introducing what he's about to say instead of saying it. And I know that Matt was saying, that, quit introducing what you're about to say and just say it. I think that is a language issue.
I'll say it.
Right.
Okay.
And that's not something bad on you. I'm just trying to identify that as something that is not bad about a characteristic of you. I think that is a cultural and language thing that we're trying to get past.
Probably that is true. Probably. I'm saying that the sum of created things does not exist in and of itself, because every part of it does not exist in and of itself. The fact that a creature is brought into existence means that if you bring 2 creatures, 3 creatures, 4 creatures, if you bring in as many creatures as you like, that would be a greater indication that the sum is dependent on something external. The more creatures we have, the greater the need for that external thing that brings them into existence.
So hold on. Would you say that if we are at 7 billion human beings on Earth, right, we need more people to be fucking to be bringing more human beings on Earth. So we necessarily need more people fucking for us to have more people on Earth, right? Is that what you're going at?
No, I'm saying that one human being cannot exist in and of himself. He is not eternal. He is not independent. He is dependent on something external that brings him into existence.
So what I would like to do...
If we say that it is a human being before him, if we say that it is the parents, then those parents, they are only part of that sum. You see, they are part of that sum, and that sum cannot be said to exist in and of itself.
Why?
Because every particular has a beginning. So
hold on, but we're talking about that as a definition, Mohammed. Again, we're defining these things into existence. What you're doing is you're implying that somewhere at the base of it, there has to be an infinite thing causing those things to begin. And I'm just not going to follow you there, man, because there's no justification for it. I think we should take a break, and you take a look at the video, and I'll take a look at the video, and maybe we'll talk again.
Eric, just the last point.
Okay, last word. Go for it.
Yes. If the sun cannot exist by itself, it cannot exist by a part of itself with greater reason. So the sun must depend on something external. You see, it cannot exist by itself, so it can't exist by a part of itself. It cannot exist by just another created thing. These are the 3 points I wanted to tell Matt about, but I was mistaken when I called him the atheist experience last time.
Yeah, I feel like I was very generous in giving you time.
Thank you very much.
I feel like you moved past things that I said and didn't really take into account a thing that I said at the end there. You just wanted to say it.
Forgive me if I did. I'm sorry.
I want us to have a conversation and not have a proselytization, right? But we're going to move forward. Mohammed, thank you for calling, and you take care, all right?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care.